He's Howard Ibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 28 years of experience. Together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. Henry, we've got a fascinating guest today, all the way from Toronto. His name is Mack Saunders. He'll tell us more. Let's join the conversation. Right. Hey, Henry, we are back with another episode of the Brief Brothers, and I'm really delighted to welcome as our guest today, Mack Saunders. Mack is coming to us from Toronto, Ontario. And Mack is the son of a friend of ours, Lance Saunders, who's been on our show a couple of times. I had the opportunity to meet Mack a couple of weeks ago when I was in Toronto on a speaking engagement and got a chance to spend some time with my old friend, Lance. And Lance said, I want you to meet my son. He is doing some cool stuff with a boutique hotel in Toronto. And in fact, we went over there and I met Mack and had this great conversation. I said, this, I think, is something that our viewers would like to learn more about. So Mack is the director of brand experience at a boutique hotel called the Annex. It is a small hotel, 24 rooms, that is not so much a destination as a place to hang your hat and to go out and explore. And so, Mack, welcome to the Brief Brothers. Henry and I are delighted to have you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm super excited. It was a pleasure to meet you in person a couple weeks ago. So I was eager to jump with a chance to talk more about what we got going on at the Annex and brag about myself a little bit, which I don't do enough of.
Okay, that's great. Well, the other thing that's cool about what Mack's doing, Mack has got 4 other partners. So there's about 5 of you. They came into, they acquired this property about a year ago. So it existed before, but now as the director of brand experience, you're making it your own. And you also shared with me when I was visiting in Toronto that you have also recently acquired a property here in Palm Springs, right down the road from where I live. Also called the Annex, but it is basically, it doesn't exist yet. The structure exists, but you haven't put your magic to it. You're about to break ground and transform it from whatever it was now to the Annex. And it will be a different kind of experience. It will be more of a destination because it's here in Palm Springs.
Mm-hmm.
What fascinated me about meeting you and hearing you talk about your experience, both as a brand expert and with this hotel, were the trials and tribulations that you've experienced working with outside creative partners to start the process of building your brand.
Mm-hmm.
Henry and I love to talk about what the inside work is required to put a brand together, starting with, marketing and advertising and our fundamentals like a creative brief. You're doing it for an entire property, two now, and you had some struggles. So first, why don't you give us a little background on how what were you studying in school? What was it like, living with your dad, who's knows a thing or two about advertising and strategy and ran some major shops in Canada and in the United States, how that influenced you, and a little bit of the trajectory of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, living with my dad was great. He's an amazing father, is an amazing father. I love him to death. He pretty much taught me what it meant to be a creative person. There's a lot of hours that I watched him with piles of paper spread across our dining room tables over the years, working through various strategies, boiling them down to very specific things. I think my earliest memory of that was him working on a Nutri-Grain campaign way back in the day. So I've kind of always been surrounded by it. And I think by nature of my own interest when I was a younger lad, skateboarding and sports and hockey and snowboarding and these kind of things, there's always been a natural tie to creativity, whether it's through art or design or how they market themselves or the grandiose events that these various companies put on. So I've always kind of been drawn to that industry in a way. And I think I just as time passed and I started to figure out what I wanted to do, I just naturally was tapered towards that kind of category. And I ended up at the University of Waterloo to study communications, and with a specialization in digital arts and media, which is a long, fancy way of saying learning how to advertise and market different messaging. I had a great time at the University of Waterloo. It's a great town. I had some fun, but I learned a lot. It wasn't very skill oriented, I would say. It was a lot of philosophy and how to frame arguments, and that was really the benefit I got out of there. I wanted to shout out one of my most influential professors, Rob Danish. He had a huge impact on me in terms of how I communicate what I need to communicate, and where I deliver those messages. So after Waterloo, I kind of just jumped into the free world and got a job wherever I could, and it's kind of continued my tapering towards the inevitable advertising and creative route.
What got you interested in, well, to me, it seems like a slight left turn to be interested in advertising and then get into the hotel business. Although branding, that kind of makes sense. So explain to me how that worked. What drew you into that?
One of my first jobs out of university, or while I was at university, was at a private membership club in Vancouver, aptly called the Vancouver Club. And I was literally just starting there to make some bucks to spend on beers on the weekends with my buddies. And I didn't realize that I was actually going to meet probably the second biggest mentor of my life, aside from my dad, in a man named Philip Ireland. And he really kind of grabbed a hold of me and, in a very gentle but deliberate way, pushed me in a direction that I didn't expect myself to go. I had always loved hospitality. I've always loved restaurants. I've always loved hotels. I was lucky enough to travel along and tag along with Lance on various pitch meetings around the world when I was a little guy. And we got to experience some really cool things around the world. And one of those things is hotel lobbies, but which I'll touch on a little bit later. But when I got into the hospitality world, I met this man, Philip Ireland. And I was quite literally bussing tables and just hanging out. And he sat me down one day and asked me what I want to do. And I told him that I wanted to get into marketing, and I love brands, and I love design, and I love fashion, and I loved all these things. So he kind of pushed me in a direction at the Vancouver Club, where I was put on a trajectory to work with their marketing team and their membership team at a really young age. I'm super thankful to him. I was not equipped, nor was I very good at what I was doing at that time, but he taught me how to take leaps and to fail and to push. He always rewarded creativity and trying new things. And I loved my time there. And I met another guy by the name of James Grass, who now is a hospitality consulting firm in Vancouver. And those two guys really shaped my idea of what great hospitality is, and how it connects to great marketing, and how it really is how they needed to draw people in was through beautiful experiences and great design and events that were really curated to what their membership wanted at any specific time. So I was learning all these things about marketing and advertising that I didn't really even realize at the time. It was just kind of, how do we get more memberships? How do we throw great events? How do we make people feel really special? And after that, I went into my natural passion, which was fashion, and I got a couple jobs working in the fashion industry, and inevitably the hospitality industry pulled me back in. So I kind of went full circle. Started in hospitality as a young guy, left for a little bit, but I've always had some sort of involvement with the direct consumer side, dealing with customers on a daily basis, before I got into the behind the computer job.
My inclination is to just kind of draw the conclusion, right or wrong, that your interest is in design and the visual side of things. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
It's always been, yeah, that's definitely fair. I grew up, like I said, loving skateboarding. It's got a heavy tie there with the sneaker culture and just design of great skate decks. I was never very good, but I loved the world of those shops. And when you're 10 years old and you walk into a skate shop, even though it's some teenager who's probably baked behind the desk, you look up to them like they're a god, like they work in this really cool store that sells these amazing things. But you don't realize that when you're a little guy. So I've always kind of been drawn towards that. And that's a very fair assessment. It still is what I spend my hours doing on when I'm not on the clock.
Okay, so how did you get yourself into this position where you could now become the director of brand experience at at a hotel like the one I saw in Toronto called the Annex? Well, how did that happen?
It was a little bit of right place, right time, which I think all good things are. And when I was working here in Toronto for a famous menswear store called Uncle Otis, I had naturally started taking over kind of like the Instagram and the website experience, and kind of always throwing my hat in the ring with how can I help with designing a t-shirt, or how can I help us make our Instagram look better, our social media presence, how can I help us sell more t-shirts online through a beautiful website. And because it was such a small team, I was afforded that opportunity at a really young age again. Um, and through some personal connections, I started to freelance on the side with like multiple smaller consumer facing projects. And one of those that came along the way was the Annex. A friend of mine that I had met way back in the day playing junior hockey had moved to Toronto to take over the Annex as the general manager, who is now our CEO. And he reached out to me and said, "Hey, we need some help with how we're approaching getting ourselves online and how we look online. Would you be open to helping us out?" I jumped on the opportunity, ran with it, and it's kind of snowballed from there. Our team is super small and mighty, so I think it, to you borrow a phrase from you earlier, it was definitely a trial by fire. We got to figure it out as we're going, and it's kind of, as the team has shrunk or become more deliberate, I'll say, we've all had to like kind of spread our expertise across multiple variances. We're still learning everything day by day. So it's a fun project. I like to think that we're good at what we do, but we're all very much open to the fact that we are not experts yet.
I'm seeing a direct line here between an interest in skateboarding and hockey to branding and design here. It's like, so ladies and gentlemen out there, if you want some good advice when you're young, start skateboarding and hanging out at skateboard shops. I mean, when I was a kid, the thing that I liked was I was into water skiing, and there was no such thing where I grew up as a water skiing shop. It was not quite a sports, a sporting goods store, but maybe a snow ski and water ski, kind of a combination. They had mostly snow skis and a few water skis. So that was where I like to hang out. But no, so you did some freelance. And the other thing that I'm hearing from you is that you were so eager to both learn and do that you spoke up and volunteered to do projects. And Henry and I talked to a lot of folks, especially younger creative talent, either in school or just out of school. And that seems to be a common thread, that they are sponges and want to absorb as much as they can about what can I do to help? What can I do to learn?
Yeah.
So for what I'm gathering, you didn't have direct training in how to build a brand. It was by osmosis. It was by the tutelage of this guy in Vancouver who took you under his wing and stepping up and saying, how can I do this for Instagram? How can I do that? Where would you say you got the chutzpah, to coin a phrase, to step up and say, I think I can handle this and do this for the Annex?
I think I was perhaps too stupid to know that I could fail. And I think I had, when you're young and there's no stakes, I wasn't going to burn the business down by any decision that I was going to be making. I was able to just kind of ask. I think I was lucky. I hear a lot of young people today. I hate using that phrase because I'm still a young guy, but I hear a lot of people coming out of university saying, like, I don't know what I want to do. And I think I've realized now that I was super lucky in that I had direct passions, and I kind of knew what I wanted to do from a younger age. I didn't know how it was going to evolve and what it was going to get to. When I was younger, my dream job was to be a creative director at Nike. I was obsessed with sports. I was obsessed with sneakers. That was my Shangri-La of a position to have. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I had some sort of idea. So when I volunteered and like kind of pushed and asked for more things and opportunities at companies I was working for, I kind of always had that trajectory. So I I really was narrowed at an early age, which I think was a huge advantage for me in terms of my mentality and what I was asking to do, as I just kind of had an inkling of where I was going to go and what I wanted to do. Um, I dabbled in many things that I was not good at, but yeah.
Okay, so I'm kind of doing a slow build here, giving you a little, setting you up so you can share with our viewers, what
Hmm.
your experience was, because like I said at the beginning of this conversation, I was fascinated when I first met you to hear about the challenges you faced. You have a task, or had a task when you were first starting out, to build this brand called the Annex. That was your job. And you started off by reaching out to creative resources, agencies, small shops, freelancers, combination of those,
Hmm.
to help you achieve specific tasks that you set out for the Annex. Share with us what some of those experiences were like. And I'm not asking you to name names. I don't want you to make any, embarrass anybody, but you faced some challenges and some frustrations. And that's really what I want to hear your stories about, because I think there's some insights about client creative resource relationships, and you've learned a thing or two about that. So I'd like to hear about
Hmm.
that.
Well, again, we at the Annex learn everything on a day by day basis. So when I was kind of early in my full time position with the hotel, like you mentioned, one of my tasks is to expand the brand. I want to be I want to be clear. I was very gifted, or where I walked into a beautifully designed brand and story that existed prior to my involvement with the hotel. So I didn't have to build that story from the ground up. We had a language, we had some sort of direction, we had a target group, whatever you want to call it. We had an idea of where our direction was going to go that way.
You had a
My
little bit
job
of equity. You had a little bit of equity in the brand already.
Exactly, yeah, and it was beautifully put together by a design shop in Montreal that the name escapes me, um, but by one of our current owners. His name's Trevor Spees, and he built this brand hand in hand with a design shop prior to my involvement. So when I walked into the Annex, we had something. There was a groundwork to put there. What we needed to do, we had the product. We needed to tell the world. So we needed to go about it in a way that we thought was different than other hotels, build the lifestyle, and social media and digital presence is like a huge piece of that. Obviously, the landscape shifts beneath our feet every single day. So it's a constant growing and evolving. When I came into the space, when I came into the world as a quote unquote digital marketer or digital brand expert, whatever you want to call it, I came in as the expert. I know how to do these social media things, etc. It's shifted so far in my brief career that I now am looking to the younger generation who are in university or coming out of university going, I, I need some help. Like, you tell me what I need, what to do to target a different group. So that's been a really fun way to learn. But along that path, we've kind of employed different people and agencies to execute that image. And, it's hand in hand. It's learning experience on my side and a learning experience for everyone that's involved with. I don't think if you call any project on earth, I don't think you can call any project on earth a perfect one. Um, so some of our challenges we've kind of experienced are maybe not getting the deliverables that we loved or that were up to what we wanted. Um, we had challenges with scope of work kind of being shifted throughout the process. maybe not not fully understanding how the process of creation would go, from ideation and strategy to deliverable date. That kind of process has been murky at times. So those are kind of the three main challenges we have experienced over the years. And we've gotten some amazing projects done with partners. We've got some not so great projects done with partners, and anything and everything in between. So it's been a fun ride, and I've met some amazing creatives throughout the process. But I love the phrase that you actually introduced me to when we met in person, as being a brand guardian. And I've used that phrase a couple times since you introduced me to it. And I've
I'll send
realized
you a
now
bill.
that that's fine. Um, as a brand guardian, I've realized that I have to be so much more directive with what I am giving people who aren't directly responsible for our brand. They're just kind of task oriented on their deliverables. The language and how you deliver what you want is so much more important than I thought it was. I didn't know what that process was gonna be like at the beginning. I was issuing RFPs when I had just learned what that meant, a couple months prior. So it's been an adventure in itself, and we've kind of shifted our model, and we still use a lot of third parties to execute creative vision. Most of our, I would say almost 100% of the things we do are externally provided, but it's been a fun ride and an adventure.
I wanted
Go
to,
ahead, Henry.
an interesting point you made early on, or as we started talking about, this chapter, um, was the difference between a product, which you said you inherited this product that had, was a good product. In this case, it's a hotel, a boutique hotel. The difference between that and building a brand, right? Like,
Mhm.
and there is a difference. You could have a great experience, great, front of house staff, rooms, the housekeeping, the restaurant, the bar, everything could be wonderful, but that doesn't necessarily build a brand, right? A brand is something you have to be intentional about. And now it becomes even more important because if you're a single property hotel, I mean, you could get by on having a reputation of being a really nice hotel and that's it. But as now you're expanding to California, and presumably, if all goes well, it could mean more, right? So that brand suddenly becomes something bigger than just the property. Um, and and then as you were talking about, like, building a brand, I was thinking that to build a hotel brand for a single property boutique, you have to go through the same steps that you would for Hilton or Hyatt, right? But you don't have a Hilton or Hyatt budget, right? So Hilton and Hyatt can go out and spend hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to get like the best strategy, creative, whatever, whatever. Not necessarily guaranteeing that they're going to get a better product than you are, by the way, but they at least are there. So I can definitely see the challenges when you're a small client, right? But you're trying to build something big, and building a brand, regardless of the size of the hotel, it can be a monumental task. And so I think that, and you kind of alluded to it, the key there is honesty and communication, right? Because if you're working with a small agency, and they could be very, very bright, but maybe they don't have experience building a hotel brand, and you just said, well, we're not that experienced. If you're honest with each other, then you can work through it together. I think a big part of the problem with agencies, and I started my career at a boutique agency, is the fear of, we don't know how to do that. Of saying, we don't know how to do that. We're going to learn. And the truth is, what you want is smart people. You don't necessarily want people that have done that exact thing before. You want people that are going to figure it out. That to me is more valuable than what they did for another client in another situation. So I don't know. I guess I'm kind of reacting to some of what you said, but I definitely think that agency communication is the tough part, because everybody's posing. Nobody wants to be the person that doesn't know.
Yeah.
And I think that leads to a really interesting question, if you don't mind me just following up on that, Henry, and that is, you've had some experience. You got problem solved, but it was a little rough along the way. What if I were a young person saying, I'm going to start building a brand, what advice would you give me from what you've learned?
There's so many, so many. The immediate thought that comes to my head is be really specific. Um, I think there's a lot of brands out there that try to sell everything to everyone, and the quicker you narrow that funnel to targeting specific people, the quicker you get to your storyline, to your narrative, to your ideas. It just gives you a framework so much faster to be able to launch projects, because I'm super gifted with it. With the people I work with, everyone's creative in their own right. But we have artists, we have musicians, we have painters, we have all sorts of people that we work with that I work with directly on a day-to-day basis. We all have great ideas, but without a framework to apply, we would be shooting from the hip all the time in terms of what we're doing on a daily basis. But that specificity allows us to go, okay, that's a sick idea. That a party would be an amazing time and it would be great content, all these things. Does it translate to the story we're trying to tell on a global basis one day? We're trying to, once you narrow that down and get that really dialed in, it makes work easier, because you're allowed to say no to things easier. So be specific is a really simple way of diluting that thought.
But I think you've also kind of highlighted that there's a road of discovery for the client himself, right?
Oh yeah.
To figure that out and say what we are and what we aren't. Because obviously, I think agencies also and creative resources don't want to go on wild goose chases either, right? Like the more,
No.
and we talk about, our charter here is to talk about creative briefs, and really in essence, it's a sort of brief, right? It's like saying, creating that box, and we always hear the box as if it's a bad thing, but the reality is, as we've quoted often, is give me the freedom of a tightly written brief. It,
Yeah.
it tells you where you're playing, and to borrow another expression, is it's creativity is like tennis. The objective isn't to hit it out of the box, it's to get as close to the edge as possible without going over. And so I think that self-discovery as a client and figuring out what you are and what you want to be, and sometimes an agency can help you do that, right? And I think enlisting an agency or a strategist or a strategy company can help you identify that. Or every client is different, right? The aptitude of every person is different, so some people might need more help than others in helping define that. But to me, that would be critical. I mentioned I worked at a boutique agency, so we would get a lot of entrepreneurial kind of owner client types walk through the door as potential new business. And it's very difficult a lot of times, particularly if that entrepreneurial owner doesn't really have a marketing background. I'll give you an example. One time, we had a guy who was from Colombia. He was a very wealthy sugar farmer from Colombia, and he had an idea for a soft drink based on sugarcane juice, which is something that exists in Latin America. You get like fresh sugarcane juice, but nobody had figured out a way to chemically process the sugarcane juice in a way that it would retain its flavor and be shelf stable. It was like and this guy discovered a process, or claimed to have discovered a process. but he wasn't a marketer. He was a farmer. He was a very wealthy guy. And the problem with entrepreneurs a lot of times is because they're smart in one domain, they think they're smart in every domain. And I remember we were sitting in our conference room and we were talking to this guy, and he's saying, no, because I know what I like. He's like, for example, that I don't like that. And he points at a blackboard. We used to have these presentation boards where we would present ideas on. It was on the shelf behind me in the conference room. And I looked at it, and I looked at him, and I said, well, that's okay, because that was designed for a 13-year-old Latina girl, and that's not you. So you have to understand that part of this is, understanding your target audience, understanding things that are outside of your domain. So yeah, just going back to, that one of the pitfalls, right, is because, and I'm not saying it happened in your case, I'm saying what potentially could happen is, well, we know the hotel business. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you know the branding business, or you don't know, consumer research, or yeah. So, and I think that that's something that you see a lot with a lot of small businesses as they start to deal with ex, external resources for creativity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's well said. I think that we've gotten better at telling that story, and that, again, like in hindsight, looking back at projects we've launched with various, people and partners, is we hadn't discovered that well enough, and we were kind of relying a little too heavily on someone else to tell our story. So it really required us to take a step back and talk about internally what we were doing and what we needed to, what the story was, what we wanted to tell in order to hand that off for great execution. So it's a great point. It requires like a lot of meditation, I guess, on lying in the field, staring at the stars, thinking about what you want to sell and how you want to go about it and what your product means, and not to be holistic about it, but it requires a lot of thought process to go into that sandbox or that tennis court to create and then be able to hand off to various people to give it to. So
At
Have
the same time,
you?
it's very exciting because
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
you
yeah, it's
you're basically building something from the ground floor, as opposed to a lot of my, I work with big institutional clients nowadays, and if you're a client if you're working on the client side, you know there's a lot that you cannot move, right? These are
mm,
immovable pieces, but when you're on the ground floor building a brand, that's its own reward.
yeah.
So I guess that leads me to the question, a kind of an obvious question. Henry alluded to it just a moment ago. Have you and your partners attempted to write down some kind of, and there are lots of things I could say, like a brand brief, a mantra, a manifesto. I've seen these terms bandied around on LinkedIn, just as one example,
Yeah.
where you articulate what it is that, who you are, what it is that you aspire to, who you're talking to. Have you tried to articulate that in a document?
We're in the process of it right now. So, I mean, like I mentioned, our group took over in May of 2023. So we're very much new to operate. Well, we're not new to operating the business, but we're new to growing the business, as it were. And we did a weekend retreat in July, where we kind of forced each other to sit around a table with a couple glasses of wine and talk about this, and in various ways. What does a great digital presence look like? What does a great guest experience look like? What does Annex hospitality mean? What are all these things? We attempted to define a lot, and we have a phrase that we've come up with that we think really embodies what the ideal guest experience is. It can direct projects, campaigns, on the advertising side. It can direct our vision and how we partner with people and the types of events that we throw, all across the board. And the phrase we've come up with is artists living comfortably. And
Hmm.
we think it really encapsulates what we love, which all of us have in some way, or whether we are creators or just lovers of art and design. There's that world that we all have our fingers in some way. And the idea of a great hotel is just to be comfortable and be safe. If people are traveling to new places, they want to stay in a place that's comfortable, that's safe. But a little bonus that we add in is that it's super inspiring, and that we hope that when you check in on any given day, you're stumbling across an amazing piece of art in the lobby or in the hallway or in your room, or there's some cool event going on downstairs in our lobby that you weren't planning on attending, that you walk through and experience. And even if you don't stay, just to create those little conversations with like whoever you're checking in with or someone you're talking on the phone with later, going, hey, I'm staying at this cool place, and they're doing a flower workshop downstairs. They teach you how to build a beautiful bouquet with a cocktail. And there's I was downstairs having a coffee, and they have a daytime DJ, you know, kind of amping the vibe up in the lobby. So different things of that nature that really kind of encapsulate what an artist is. And I don't know, I also love the idea that art can be anything. I'm about halfway through one of my favorite people on Earth's book, Rick Rubin's book on creativity, and he's got so many great my little tidbits in there about how art is literally anything that's created. It can be. I often make fun of our CEO Ryan Queen, who is an artist with spreadsheets. He can create them out of thin air and create super complex business models, just with great expertise. And I always say that that's art, to be able to do that and craft our business and lead us down a road of success and profit in a really creative way. And I think that artists living comfortably is a way that we kind of encapsulate everything, where you don't have to be a painter to be an artist. You can be a great accountant. Great accountants are great artists. We just don't want it to be limited to that world. So it's our job to kind of communicate that effectively, where art can be anything that's created from the mind.
Rick Rubin, of course, being the legendary music producer, right?
Yes.
That's what you're
Yeah.
referring to.
Yes.
Real quick, given the conversation we had, kind of like marketers, particularly in smaller enterprises, learning their way, it's a good place to give a plug to our friend of the show, Mark Ritson. Professor Mark Ritson has a couple of programs that I've participated in, both of them, an MBA in marketing, um, uh, which is a virtual course one can take, and in brand management. And so, like, he basically takes what you would learn in a high level MBA program from like one of the elite universities, and strips out everything that's not related to marketing and sets it aside and just focuses on the marketing part, and then the brand management. And so he's trained a ton of marketers around the world, a lot from the UK. But it's a really good resource for people that find themselves in marketing and brand management roles that didn't necessarily have the academic background like I did. My degree was in economics. I fell into advertising, kind of found my way into strategy, and so I had to learn marketing just kind of by doing, and always kind of had that imposter syndrome going on. Like, am I doing the right thing? And so I took, I was part of the first cohort in the MBA for marketing, and then the other one for brand management. I was also in the first cohort, though for complicated reasons I finished with the second cohort. But I just a plug for that, because I think we talk about training and continuing education a lot here on the podcast, and that's a great resource.
Yeah, I would agree. And Henry's a graduate of both they're mini MBAs, right? That's what they
Yes,
call the mini MBAs.
mini MBA. Sorry, yeah, mini
Yeah.
MBA.
And we had a nice conversation with Mark, maybe 2 years ago. He's in Tasmania on the other side of the planet.
Very cool.
So you might check that out. So you're this line, artists living comfortably, you see that reflecting this new property, which is still in the works as well,
Hmm.
out here in Palm Springs.
Hmm. Yeah, and like I said, like just having some sort of guideline that allows us to give to talented architects and designers and interior designers, whoever we're going to use. We're still so early on in the process. We don't have many things, except we have a great architecture partner based out of Toronto here, and they've done amazing renderings to this point. We're just eagerly waiting, breaking ground. But having a guideline like artists living comfortably allows us to talk about everything from where the beds go in the room to how the pool's laid out to how the check-in process goes. Is this really going to relate to living a comfortable, safe, inspiring experience when you're on our properties or at an Annex hotel? So it's kind of become our de facto sandbox.
Okay, well, let's pivot and talk about what you, because I know you haven't broken ground yet out here in Palm Springs. It's the property's in place and you have plans for it. I've seen the renderings. Bring us up to speed. Where are you right now? What are the plans? And what are your hopes?
We're still in the kind of early stages of finalizing the deal. As everyone knows, in commercial real estate, things don't happen overnight and they are slow moving. And we are really hopeful that it gets across the line. So we're not quite official, but I would never consider us official until I can step foot and there's an Annex logo on the wall. However long that takes. So our plan is to exist in a market that's really cool in Palm Springs that has really strong design language. It's kind of the center of mid-century modern, as much as a buzzword that is in interior design and furniture design in California. California is obviously super tied to the art scene and my personal like surfing and skateboard culture that exists down there. The Lords of Dogtown famously kind of brought that scene to the grand scale, or the main stage, if you will. So we want to create a really cool experience that's different from what's offered by other hoteliers down there. There's some amazing operators down there that are doing really, really cool things. There's your run of the mill, there's your super high end luxury down there as well. So we kind of want to we were finding our point within that market to create a really cool experience where we want to keep people on the property for a certain amount of time, and so that they can experience being artists, living comfortably, and then go out and experience the world of Palm Springs, what they have to offer. I think that's going to be a huge piece of what we do. We're never going to be kind of a Four Seasons or Shangri-La hotel where we want people to check in and just use a spa all day and hit the restaurant on the rooftop and kind of exist within the four walls for all 24 hours of a stay. We want you to stay for a piece of the time, but we are choosing markets to exist in where there is significant cultures, great food scene, great art scene, things to do that are kind of outside the realm of the main, I don't know, tourist attractions that we can direct people to so they can experience a different level of what a city or community has to offer.
So this is more of a destination than the Toronto space, because the Annex in Toronto
Definitely.
is drop your bags and explore and enjoy Toronto, whereas Palm
Definitely.
Springs could be, it's not the, like you said, it's not the full-fledged destination, but it is more of a destination.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's a reality of what that market is like in
Yeah.
Palm Springs. People are escaping city life to go hang out in the desert and soak up some rays, play some golf, play some tennis, lay by a pool, have a martini, and pretend they're Frank Sinatra and part of the Rat Pack for the weekend.
Right, right. Okay, so what I think is kind of exciting from our perspective is that because you are still in the design phases of the Palm Springs space, it's not yet open for business. We can invite you back and inquire about how the experience is evolving and unfolding and the challenges that you are facing.
Compass a room and we'll record live there.
Yeah, there you go. We've never
Poolside.
done that before. Yeah, we could do
Yeah.
an episode right there around the pool. Great idea, Henry. I hadn't thought about that.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
We'd be happy to. We'd be happy to.
Well, like I was saying before we hit the record button, my plan was to have driven by the space because it's there. The physical building is there. It just hasn't had the annex touches applied to it yet. I was going to take some snaps, and I'm a little behind the ball, but I look forward to driving by it and hearing more. And then, of course, in the coming months and maybe in a year or so, we can get you back here and tell us what's going on.
I would love that. Yeah, I'm super excited for this project. It's the first time any of us have built a hotel. So it's going to come with a lot like the brief process and the advertising world. It's going to come with some learnings, a lot of employment for third parties and various people, talented people that we got to bring into the fold to help execute our vision. So it's a different thing because it's going to be a physical product that comes to life at the end of it, as opposed to, you know, most of my world, which is the digital experience side. It's going to be fun. We're already having fun with it. It's a lot of dreams and aspirations for the property. So we're super excited to grow this thing. We're really hopeful and passionate about the Annex project, and we think that we're onto something special here. So we're excited to be in Palm Springs and hopefully many other cities to come pretty soon here.
All right. Well, Mack Saunders, Director of Brand Experience at the Annex in Toronto and soon to be the Annex in Palm Springs. Thank you so much for joining Henry and me. We loved having you. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
He's Howard Ibach. Together, we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time. Bye-bye.